They called her the machine behind her back. Every maneuver Lieutenant Chen executed was flawless, too flawless. Her squadron mates laughed as they watched her flight recordings. Perfect angles, perfect turns, perfect calculations. But perfection doesn't win dogfights, they said, until one day when unknown hostiles appeared on radar and everyone froze except her. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If you enjoy stories about underestimated heroes, consider subscribing to see the rest of this 3-part series. The hangar buzzed with laughter, dim fluorescent lights casting long shadows across the concrete floor. 7 pilots huddled around the debriefing screens, replaying the same flight sequence for the 3rd time that evening. Look at that turn, exactly 27 degrees. Captain Reynolds pointed at the screen with his half-empty coffee mug. Who flies like that? The machine strikes again. More laughter rippled through the group as they watched the fighter jet execute a flawless maneuver that looked more like a computer simulation than actual flying. Perfect angles, perfect turns, Reynolds continued, shaking his head. Someone tell Chen this isn't a ballet recital. Lieutenant Maya Chen sat alone at the far corner of the room, pretending to review her notes while their comments drifted toward her. Her face remained expressionless, a skill she'd perfected over months of similar mockery, but her knuckles whitened as she gripped her tablet. Colonel Weber, approaching his retirement and too tired to correct the squadron's dynamics, cleared his throat. All right, people, that's enough entertainment. Tomorrow's escort mission is standard protocol. Merchant vessels through the South Passage, potential piracy concerns, but intelligence suggests minimal risk. He glanced toward Maya. Nothing fancy required, just fundamental flying. Dismissed. The group dispersed, pilots clapping each other's shoulders and continuing their banter as they headed for the barracks. No one approached Maya, and she made no move to join them. 3 hours later, the hangar sat empty and dark, except for the soft blue glow from a terminal in the corner archive room. Maya sat hunched over the keyboard, her access card, borrowed from a sympathetic technician who owed her a favor, plugged into the console. On the screen, classified flight patterns scrolled past, each labeled with warning tags: restricted access, command clearance required, classified threat assessment. Her eyes moved methodically over each formation, memorizing the patterns, committing to memory the countermaneuvers detailed in footnotes never meant for regular pilots. She'd been doing this for months now, risking her career because something in these files had caught her attention, something that made her increasingly uneasy. When the door to the archive room suddenly creaked, Maya quickly blanked the screen and pulled the access card. Lieutenant Decker peered in, surprised to find anyone still awake. "Chen, what are you doing here this late?" "Running threat assessments," she replied calmly. Not technically a lie. Decker yawned. "Always the overachiever. Get some sleep. Even machines need to recharge." He disappeared down the corridor without waiting for a response. Maya slipped the borrowed access card into her pocket and headed for her quarters, mentally reviewing what she'd learned. Something was coming. Something Command wasn't sharing with regular pilots, and her perfect flying might be their only chance when it arrived. Morning arrived with the usual routines. In the locker room, pilots suited up while swapping stories of past missions and close calls, building the camaraderie that kept morale high and nerves steady. "That time over the Caspian," Reynolds recounted, zipping up his flight suit, "I had to flip upside down with less than 50 feet clearance. Engine cutting out, warnings blaring, pure instinct took over. No textbook could teach that move." Various pilots nodded appreciatively. Maya remained silent as she methodically checked her oxygen mask seals and communications equipment, running through her pre-flight checklist with characteristic thoroughness. "Hey Chen," Reynolds said, approaching her locker. His tone wasn't hostile, just condescending in the way senior officers often were to those they considered technically proficient but lacking in critical instinct. "Try flying like a human being today, not like you're following invisible rails. Sometimes you need to feel the aircraft, not calculate its trajectory." Maya only nodded, refusing to engage. Arguments would only reinforce their perception, and she had more important concerns than hurt pride. An hour later, the squadron soared through clear blue skies, 7 fighters in standard formation escorting 3 merchant vessels through contested waters. Radio chatter filled Maya's helmet, the easy banter of pilots who'd flown together for years. "So then I told the Admiral, with all due respect, sir, if you wanted it done by regulation, you should have sent someone who cared about regulations." Laughter followed, along with more stories. Maya remained silent, monitoring her instruments with heightened attention. 2 hours into the mission, she noticed something on her radar, a subtle pattern that didn't match expected civilian or military traffic. 3 blips, appearing simultaneously in a triangular formation before vanishing. She hesitated, then decided not to report it. Not yet. not until she was certain. The anomaly disappeared, then reappeared slightly stronger 5 minutes later. This time 5 blips, same configuration, but larger spread. Maya's breathing changed imperceptibly. Her hands tightened on the controls. "Control, this is Raptor 3, she finally said, breaking her silence. "I'm picking up intermittent signals at bearing 047. Can you confirm?" "Negative, Raptor 3, came the response. "Skies are clear, probably sensor ghosting in the clouds." Reynolds' voice cut in. "The machine getting spooked by shadows? That's a first." Before Maya could respond, her radar screen exploded with light. Dozens of contacts appeared simultaneously, approaching from multiple vectors in a formation that made her blood run cold. She recognized it instantly, the exact pattern she'd been studying in those classified files. The squadron radio erupted with confused voices. "What is that?" "Unknown bogies, multiple directions." "Control, we have no identification." Even Colonel Weber sounded rattled. "I've never seen this pattern before. Control, we need immediate identification and threat assessment." The response from Control was equally confused. "Stand by, Raptor Squadron, we're analyzing the contacts." As everyone else struggled to make sense of what was happening, Maya felt an eerie calm settle over her. She'd seen this before, in those classified files, the circling hawk formation, designed to appear suddenly, surround a target group, and funnel them into a precision kill box. Her squadron was flying straight into a trap. She took a deep breath and spoke with unexpected authority. "It's a circling hawk formation. Standard evasion protocols won't work." A moment of stunned silence followed. "How do you know what it is?" Reynolds demanded. Maya ignored the question. There was no time to explain how she knew about a classified enemy tactic. "Everyone listen carefully. Follow my exact movements. No improvisation, no heroics." For several tense seconds, no one responded. Then Colonel Weber made a decision. "Do what she says." "Break formation standard delta," Maya commanded, her voice steady. "Realign at heading 047. Prepare for vertical dispersion on my mark." The squadron complied, moving into positions that contradicted every evasion tactic they'd been taught. As they completed the maneuver, enemy fire streaked through the space they would have occupied had they followed standard protocols. "She knew," someone whispered over the comm. "Maintain current vector for 7 seconds, Maya continued, "then drop 600 feet on my mark." "Mark!" The squadron dived in perfect unison. Seconds later, another volley of fire passed harmlessly above them. For 3 minutes that felt like hours, Maya executed a flawless defensive pattern, calling positions with absolute precision, anticipating every enemy move before it happened. The maneuvers were exactly the ones she'd memorized from those classified files, counters specifically designed for this rare attack formation. "How are you doing this?" Colonel Weber asked between commands. "I've run this scenario before," Maya responded, not mentioning the classified simulations she'd accessed without authorization. "They're using a tripartite attack formation designed to funnel us into a kill box. There's only one escape path." Through it all, Maya flew with the same too-perfect precision that her squadron had mocked for months. But now, that precision wasn't just impressive, it was keeping them alive. Reynolds, following another of her precise commands, finally understood. "You've been preparing for this," he said quietly. "All those perfect maneuvers. You were training." Maya didn't respond. She was too focused on the final sequence that would bring them safely through the ambush. "Execute spiral defense pattern, my lead," she ordered. 3, 2, 1, now." The squadron moved as one unit, spiraling through a narrow corridor of safety that existed for mere seconds. And then, as suddenly as they had appeared, the enemy aircraft pulled away, vanishing from radar as quickly as they had emerged. For several moments, no one spoke. The entire engagement had lasted less than 4 minutes, yet it felt like everything had changed. "What just happened?" one of the younger pilots finally asked. Maya's voice was steady when she replied. "That was a test. They were measuring our response capabilities." She paused. "And this was just the scouting force. The real attack comes in 2 weeks." The silence in the fighter jets seemed to stretch for an eternity before Colonel Weber's voice crackled through the comm system. His usual confidence had evaporated. "Lieutenant Chen, I need clarification. How do you recognize this attack pattern, and what do you mean by the real attack comes in 2 weeks? Maya's hands remained steady on the controls as she considered her answer carefully. Admitting to unauthorized access of classified information mid-flight wasn't ideal, but the situation demanded honesty. "Sir, request permission to discuss classified intelligence upon return to base." "Denied, Lieutenant," Weber responded immediately. "I need to understand the threat assessment now." Maya took a controlled breath. "Sir, The attack pattern we just encountered is designated Circling Hawk in intelligence briefings. It's a signature formation developed by the Axian Coalition, designed to test defensive capabilities before committing to full engagement. She paused. Their standard protocol is to probe defenses 2 weeks before a major offensive. And how exactly do you have access to this intelligence, Lieutenant? Weber's tone had hardened. I'll provide full disclosure upon landing, sir. Reynolds cut in, his earlier mockery replaced with urgent focus. Chen, if you know something we don't, now's the time. Those weren't standard drones or fighters. Their movement patterns were unlike anything I've encountered in 15 years of flying. Maya knew she'd already crossed the line. Her career was likely over regardless of what happened next. What mattered now was preparing the squadron for what was coming. The Axian Coalition has developed autonomously networked fighter drones that learn and adapt based on encounter data, she explained. What we just faced was their reconnaissance unit. They were mapping our standard evasion tactics, response times, and coordination patterns. The counter-maneuvers I just guided us through weren't in our standard playbook because they're specifically designed to disrupt the Axian AI's targeting algorithms. Silence followed again before Weber spoke. Lieutenant Chen, upon return to base, you will report directly to my office for full debrief. For now, maintain standard escort formation. Raptor Squadron, resume primary mission. The flight back to base proceeded in tense quiet, the usual banter entirely absent. The merchant vessels were delivered safely to their destination, and the squadron returned to base without further incident. But Maya could feel the eyes of every pilot on her during landing, no longer dismissive, but wary and questioning. As they taxied to a stop, ground crews rushed forward, unusually alert. Maya noticed senior command staff waiting near the hangar, faces grim. Word had clearly traveled fast. Before she could even remove her helmet, 2 military police officers approached her aircraft. Lieutenant Chen, one of them said as she climbed down, you're to come with us immediately. Colonel Weber intercepted them. Stand down. The lieutenant reports to me first. Sir, we have orders directly from General Harmon. I don't care if they're from the president, Weber snapped. This is my squadron, my pilot, and my jurisdiction until I say otherwise. The MPs exchanged glances but stepped back. Weber turned to Maya. My office, now. As they walked across the tarmac, Reynolds fell into step beside them. Permission to join the debrief, sir. Weber glanced at him, then at Maya. Granted. Inside Weber's office, the atmosphere was suffocating. Maya stood at attention while Weber settled behind his desk, Reynolds taking a chair to the side. Explain yourself, Lieutenant, Weber said without preamble. How do you have knowledge of classified Axian Coalition tactics that even I haven't been briefed on? Maya met his gaze. For the past 4 months, I've been accessing classified intelligence files after hours, sir. Reynolds inhaled sharply, but Weber's expression didn't change. Continue. It began when I noticed discrepancies in our standard training protocols. The tactics we drill don't account for the latest generation of autonomous combat drones. I raised this concern through proper channels 3 times and was told the matter would be addressed in future training updates. But it wasn't, Weber supplied. No, sir, it wasn't. So I began investigating on my own. I borrowed an access card from technical specialist Rivera and started reviewing classified intelligence assessments. You realize that's enough to court-martial you, Reynolds said quietly. Yes, sir. Maya's posture remained rigid. What I discovered was that command has been aware of the Axian threat for at least 14 months, but limited the intelligence briefings to senior officers in strategic command. Line pilots like us were deliberately kept uninformed. Weber's eyes narrowed. There are reasons for classification protocols, Lieutenant. With respect, sir, those protocols would have gotten us all killed today. For the first time, emotion crept into Maya's voice. The Axian drones use adaptive network intelligence. They study conventional response patterns and develop counters in real time. Our standard evasion maneuvers are precisely what they're designed to anticipate and target. And your perfect flying, Reynolds said slowly, understanding dawning. You weren't showing off. You were practicing the counter maneuvers. Maya nodded. Every simulation I could access showed an 87% casualty rate for pilots encountering Axian drones without specific counter training. I couldn't just wait for command to decide we were important enough to brief. A knock at the door interrupted them. General Harmon entered without waiting for a response, flanked by 2 intelligence officers. His weathered face was a storm of barely controlled anger. Colonel Weber, I'll take over from here. Lieutenant Chen is to be placed under immediate arrest for breach of classified intelligence protocols. Weber stood but didn't move from behind his desk. General, with respect, before any action is taken against Lieutenant Chen, I think you need to hear what happened during our mission today. I'm well aware of the encounter, Harmon said dismissively, and the unauthorized tactics Lieutenant Chen employed. tactics that saved my entire squadron, Weber countered, from a threat we had never been briefed on. Reynolds stood as well. Sir, if Lieutenant Chen hadn't recognized that attack pattern, we'd all be dead. Why weren't we informed about the Axion Coalition and their drone capabilities? Harmon's jaw tightened. That information was deemed need to know. Operational security. Need to know? Reynolds interrupted, forgetting protocol in his anger. We were the ones facing those drones. How did we not need to know? One of the intelligence officers stepped forward. The Axion threat assessment was still being verified. We couldn't risk creating unnecessary alarm or changing tactical protocols based on unconfirmed intelligence. Unconfirmed? Maya broke her silence. The simulation data is conclusive. The Axion drones target predictable flight patterns. Our standard training makes us vulnerable. And how would you know what the simulation data shows, Lieutenant? Harmon asked coldly. Because I accessed it without authorization, sir. Because our lives depended on information that was being withheld from us. The room fell silent. Maya continued, her voice steady. In 2 weeks, the main Axion force will target our key defensive positions. They now have data on our standard responses, which means they'll be able to predict the movements of every squadron except ours. Harmon's face reddened. You are out of line, Lieutenant. With respect, General, Weber interjected. If Lieutenant Chen is right about the timeline, we have 2 weeks to prepare our pilots for an attack that our current tactics can't counter. I suggest we focus on that rather than punishing the one pilot who actually recognized the threat. The intelligence officer who had spoken earlier glanced at Harmon. Sir, the timeline does align with our projections. A tense silence filled the room. Finally, Harmon spoke. Lieutenant Chen, your actions constitute a serious breach of security protocols. Under normal circumstances, you would be facing court-martial and dishonorable discharge. He paused. However, given the circumstances, your immediate knowledge is, unfortunately, valuable. He turned to Weber. Colonel, assemble your squadron for an emergency briefing in 1 hour. Lieutenant Chen will assist our intelligence team in preparing countermeasure training, after which her status will be re-evaluated. As Harmon and his officers left, Weber and Reynolds exchanged glances. When the door closed, Reynolds turned to Maya. You risked your entire career on this. I risked my career, Maya replied quietly. You would have risked your lives. Weber studied her for a long moment. The perfect flying, the hours in the simulator, the attention to every detail. It wasn't just obsession or showing off. You were preparing for this. Maya nodded. I fly the way I do because precision matters when facing an enemy that capitalizes on human error and predictability. You should have come to me, Weber said. Would you have believed me, or would you have reported me for attempting to access classified information? Weber had no answer. Reynolds extended his hand to Maya. I owe you an apology, Chen. We all do. She hesitated before accepting his handshake. We have 2 weeks to prepare the entire squadron for what's coming. The mockery doesn't matter. What matters is that when the real attack comes, everyone flies as perfectly as possible. An hour later, the entire squadron gathered in the briefing room, an unprecedented tension filling the air. Intelligence officers had set up multiple screens displaying classified Axion drone schematics and tactical assessments. Maya stood at the front of the room beside Colonel Weber and General Harmon, feeling every pair of eyes fixed on her. Pilots, Weber began, his voice grave. What you're about to hear is classified information recently elevated to squadron-level clearance. As you've already encountered firsthand, we're facing a new type of threat that our standard training hasn't prepared you for. He nodded to Maya. Lieutenant Chen will lead this briefing. Maya stepped forward, more comfortable analyzing flight patterns than addressing a room full of fellow pilots who had mocked her for months. She took a steadying breath. For the past 14 months, intelligence has been tracking the development of the Axion Coalition's autonomous drone network. Today, we encountered their reconnaissance unit. She brought up the radar footage from their mission. This formation, designated Circling Hawk, is designed to gather data on our standard evasion tactics. Reynolds spoke up. You mean they were studying us? Exactly. The Axion drones operate on a neural network that learns and adapts. They catalog our maneuvers, response times, coordination patterns, everything that might be predictable. Then they develop counters specifically designed for the pilots they've observed. Maya advanced to the next slide showing a complex formation. Based on intelligence projections and the pattern of their test deployment, we expect their main force to attack in approximately 2 weeks. The primary targets will be our defensive positions along the South Passage, and their objective will be to disable our response capabilities before we can mount an organized defense. One of the younger pilots raised his hand. If these drones adapt to our tactics, how do we fight them? By being unpredictable, Maya replied. The countermaneuvers I used today weren't random. They're specifically designed to disrupt the Axion AI's targeting algorithms by breaking expected patterns. She brought up flight simulation protocols on the main screen. For the next 2 weeks, we'll be running intensive counter training. We need to unlearn much of our standard response protocols and adapt to a new way of flying, one that prioritizes precision and unpredictability over conventional tactics. Captain Reynolds stood up. You mean we all need to start flying like the machine? There was no mockery in his tone now, only grim determination. Maya nodded. Precision flying isn't just about looking good on readouts. Against these drones, it's the difference between survival and destruction. General Harmon stepped forward. I want to be clear about something. The decision to limit this intelligence to senior command was made to prevent mass alarm and tactical leaks. That decision is now under review. He looked directly at Maya. Lieutenant Chen's actions, while a breach of protocol, have demonstrated a significant gap in our preparedness strategy. For the next hour, Maya walked the squadron through the specific countermaneuvers they would need to master. The pilots listened with unprecedented focus, asking technical questions and taking detailed notes. No one mentioned her unauthorized access to classified information. No one made jokes about perfect angles or textbook maneuvers. They were too busy trying to learn how to fly exactly like she did. As the briefing concluded, Colonel Weber addressed the room. Beginning tomorrow at 0600, we start intensive countermeasure training. Lieutenant Chen will lead these sessions with full authority to implement the necessary protocols. As the pilots filed out, Reynolds approached Maya. I've been flying combat missions for 15 years, and I've never seen anything like what you did today. He extended his hand. Thank you for saving our lives. Over the next 2 weeks, the squadron underwent the most rigorous training program they had ever experienced. Maya pushed them relentlessly, drilling precision maneuvers hour after hour in both simulators and actual flights. The very flying style they had once mocked became the standard they desperately tried to achieve. No, Peters, that bank needs to be exactly 24 degrees, not about 25 degrees, Maya would correct. At Axion targeting speeds, that 1 degree could be the difference between evasion and impact. What surprised her most was how quickly the attitude toward her changed. The pilots who had laughed at her perfect flying now requested additional simulator time with her, asking for feedback on their technique and precision. Reynolds, once her chief critic, became her strongest advocate, reinforcing her instructions and sharing her tactical assessments with younger pilots. 13 days after their encounter with the Axion Reconnaissance Unit, Maya was called to a private meeting with General Harmon. She arrived at his office to find him reviewing her personnel file. Lieutenant Chen, he said, gesturing for her to sit. Our intelligence suggests the Axion main force will make their move within the next 24-48 hours. Maya nodded. The squadron is as prepared as they can be, sir. Yes, Colonel Weber's reports have been quite positive. Harmon closed her file. Which brings me to the matter of your security breach. Maya straightened in her chair. Despite everything, she had known this moment would come. A formal review board has evaluated your actions. Unauthorized access to classified intelligence is a serious offense, potentially punishable by dishonorable discharge or even imprisonment. I understand, sir. However, Harmon continued, the board has taken into account the extraordinary circumstances and the lives saved as a direct result of your actions. He slid a document across the desk. This is their ruling. Maya picked up the paper. Instead of discharge papers, she found promotion orders to the rank of captain. She looked up in disbelief. The military values results, Captain Chen, Harmon said, his tone softening slightly. Your methods were unorthodox, but they revealed a critical flaw in our intelligence dissemination protocols. The board has determined that your actions, while technically in violation of regulations, served the greater good and demonstrated exceptional judgment. Thank you, sir. I don't know what to say. Say you'll keep your squadron alive when those drones arrive. Harmon stood. And Captain, consider this promotion a recognition not just of your actions during the encounter, but of the months you spent preparing for it. Your dedication to perfection wasn't misplaced. It was precisely what we needed. The next morning, as Maya entered the ready room in her flight suit, the pilots fell silent. Reynolds stepped forward, a small box in his hand. We heard about the promotion, he said. The squadron took up a collection. Inside the box was a silver pin shaped like a perfect geometric angle, 24 degrees, the exact bank that had saved them during the Axion encounter. A reminder, Reynolds explained, that perfection isn't something to mock. It's something to aspire to. Before Maya could respond, the alarm klaxon blared. Colonel Weber's voice came over the intercom. Axion forces detected at the outer marker. All pilots to stations immediately. As they rushed to their fighters, Reynolds caught Maya's arm. Lead us through this, Captain. For a brief moment, Maya thought of the classified files she'd studied for months, the simulations she'd run hundreds of times, the perfect maneuvers she'd practiced until they became muscle memory. She thought of all the mockery she'd endured, all for this moment. Just follow my lead, she said calmly. Fly exactly as we've practiced. In the air minutes later, Maya's radar screen lit up with dozens of Axion signatures, far more than their reconnaissance unit, arranged in a complex attack formation. But as she scanned the pattern, she recognized it immediately from her studies. "Raptor Squadron, this is Captain Chen," she said into her comm. "Double helix formation, counter pattern Sierra 7. Execute precisely on my mark." As her squadron moved into position with mechanical precision, Maya felt a strange sense of calm. They had called her the Machine as an insult, but today, that machine-like precision would save lives. What followed was 3 hours of the most intense aerial combat the South Passage had ever witnessed. The Axion drones attacked in waves, their AI constantly adapting to the squadron's maneuvers. But for every adaptation they made, Maya had studied a counter. For every targeting algorithm they deployed, she had a precise evasion pattern ready. When it was over, and the squadron returned to base without a single casualty, Maya taxied her fighter to a stop and removed her helmet with trembling hands. The enormity of what they'd accomplished finally hit her. They had faced an enemy specifically designed to kill them, and they had survived. Not through improvisation or heroics, but through perfect, precise flying. As she climbed down from her cockpit, the entire squadron was waiting. Colonel Weber stepped forward and saluted her formally. "Captain Chen," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "on behalf of the entire squad, I want to thank you for your foresight, your preparation, and your leadership today." One by one, the other pilots saluted her as well. Reynolds was the last, a new respect in his eyes. "We were wrong," he said simply, "and you were ready when no one else was." Later that evening, alone in her quarters, Maya took out a photograph she kept in her flight jacket. Her brother Michael in his dress uniform, taken 3 years before his squadron was lost to an enemy they hadn't been prepared to face. She traced his face with her finger. "We made it, Mike," she whispered. "Perfection isn't boring when it's what keeps us alive." Have you ever known someone who never asked for recognition but deserved more than anyone else? Someone whose careful preparation saved the day when no one else was ready?